Taiwan. I'm Tiffany Wong with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted at talks with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping after the two countries reached a deal to drastically lower tariffs on each other's goods. As Rosie Greninger reports, it's bringing some relief after weeks of escalating tensions.
Wall Street surges at open. The reprieve brought by a new deal between China and the United States to temporarily reduce tariffs. The two countries have been engaging in a tit-for-tat trade war since January, upping levies on products from each other's countries to over 100%. But US President Donald Trump is now describing their relationship as very good, saying he expects to speak directly with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week.
We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week.
Under the new agreement, both sides will cut tariffs by 115 percentage points, meaning that from Wednesday, US duties on Chinese goods will go from 145% to 30%, and Chinese tariffs on US goods will fall from 125% to 10%. It comes after senior Chinese and US officials held critical talks in Switzerland, their first face-to-face meeting since Trump returned to power.
We do want trade. We want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that.
China has not confirmed any plan for direct talks between Trump and Xi, but the tariff reset is being welcomed on the streets of Shanghai.
首先，这肯定算是一个好消息，就是至少事情是在往好的方向发展的。因为毕竟要考虑到，就是说中美这样子一直的进行的关税贸易战的话，对双方都是两败俱伤的，是没有好处的。
这种不正常的关税我是不希望它继续下去，或者是真的发生的。然后同时还有一个问题就是90天以后，如果再重新启动的话，这个会对于整个市场产生一个非常大的一个这个信心预期的一个波动和不确定性。
Stock markets around the world had slumped at the start of the trade war between the world's two biggest economies, amid fears of a global recession and skyrocketing prices. But news of this latest truce saw markets gain.
Where they were last week was absolutely apocalyptic. It would have resulted in supply chain disruptions that would have been something like the pandemic. There would have effectively been no trade between the United States and China. So a tariff of 30% is a high tariff, but it's a tariff that at least has a certain degree of flexibility and will allow life to go on, albeit at higher prices and maybe with greater uncertainty and delays.
Analysts also predict the 90-day pause will become permanent. And as the two nations take the first steps towards getting their trade relationship back on track, there's hope for some stability after weeks of uncertainty. Alex Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
For more on the new tariff rules and how they might affect Taipei's trade talks with Washington, reporter Chris Gorin spoke to U.S. trade lawyer James Ransdell.
So there's been a lot of movement on these tariffs and trade policy recently. Let's just start with, where exactly do the U.S. and China stand on tariffs now?
In large part, you can think of it as being dialed back to where it was on April 2nd when these tariffs were announced. So the U.S. is essentially now treating China the same as all the other countries, which were given the 90-day reprieve on the increase of the country-specific rates. So although China has now had to deal with a month of 125% tariffs, going forward, they'll have that same sort of 90-day window that everyone else had starting back in April.
So President Donald Trump has said that even if higher tariffs were to go back into effect on China, they wouldn't be as high as they were before at 145%. So regardless of what happens in their upcoming trade talks, do you think it's fair to say that we've passed peak tariffs?
I think there are certainly reasons to look at it that way. So we just saw the publication of the executive order that sort of implements this at a somewhat technical level. They dialed it back to 34%, which is what it was originally when the reciprocal tariffs were announced and the country-specific rates came out. There's also some movement on the de minimis side. De minimis is sort of shorthand for a provision of U.S. trade law that allows entries valued at $800 or less to enter without incurring duty liability. There's a lot that's still in play, but there is reason to look at this and say, okay, this is most likely, we've seen the top level and perhaps it's behind us.
Taiwan is in the middle of its own trade talks with the U.S. Do you think these developments with China might impact Taiwan's negotiations?
One is you see in the U.S.-China deal, they're back to 10%. They're not going lower than that. You saw the same thing in the U.S.-UK deal that was announced last Thursday. A lot of the provisions in that U.S.-UK deal touch on sort of maintaining the benefits on a bilateral basis. So there is a concern that's been expressed sort of in that negotiating text and by Trump administration officials elsewhere to the effect that they want to combat sort of transshipment, they want to combat evasion, they don't want to enter into a deal with a trading partner and then have that become a funnel for goods from, let's say, China or other countries with which they haven't sort of come to terms with. Taiwan's actions show that they're trying to address it. And I think they're wise and right to do so from a negotiating standpoint.
That was U.S. trade lawyer James Ransdell in Washington, D.C. China aims to support a so-called Patriotic Unification force in Taiwan. That's according to its latest national security white paper published on Monday. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, which governs Taipei's relations with Beijing, dismisses the report as containing nothing new.
昨天发表的台北书是把中共近年来发表的各项文件做一个汇总，所以并没有提出新的概念，看起来还是一个持续性的政策。
China claims Taiwan as part of its territory. The white paper says that it will seek to unify Taiwan through peaceful means, but will not rule out force. The full white paper was released in Chinese. An English abstract also released does not mention China's ambitions for Taiwan. The Defense Ministry says it spotted 31 Chinese military aircraft and 7 naval vessels operating around Taiwan in the 24 hours up to Tuesday morning. 30 of those aircraft entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This area is not Taiwan's airspace, but acts as a buffer zone for defensive purposes. The military says it also spotted 1 official ship operating near Taiwan. The incursion comes as Taiwan conducts its annual missile tests, including the first ever test firing of the U.S.-made HIMARS rocket system. Those military drills include testing dozens of new missiles, all part of an annual exercise in the country's south. Defense reporter Jaime Ocon is on site to see some of the demonstrations up close.
For the second day in a row, Taiwan's military is conducting annual live-fire missile drills in a base in Pingtung County here in the country's south. Now, for this part of the exercise, the military is firing the domestically made Land Sword missile, which is part of the country's overall air defense strategy. This is only the second time these missiles have been tested, as they're a new addition to Taiwan's arsenal. Soldiers here are simulating an enemy aircraft flying too close to the country. The military originally wanted to use these orange drones to help spot the targets, but they grounded them due to strong winds. But officials here say the most important thing is that they still managed to hit all of their targets.
我们的目的就是希望借由平时的情绪精炼，使官兵在面临真实的威胁时，能够临危不乱，有效应对。我们的接战流程都非常的顺遂。 奋力射击3枚的这个歼2飞弹，而且都顺利的打中目标。
These missiles, which can fit on the back of a truck, are part of Taiwan's push to diversify its weapons capacity. The Land Sword uses missiles that can be attached to fighter jets, and soldiers say they're getting better at using this new equipment.
因为陆射歼2是我国自主研发的武器，包含它的射程为15公里，相较于其他的武器装备都较为长远，整个射程的距离。 包含稳定的射击跟接战的顺序流程，都相较以往快速，所以这是我最大的一个认知及启发。
As part of these two-day drills, Taiwan also made history by firing the U.S.-made HIMARS for the first time, launching more than 30 missiles in the landmark test. With both the HIMARS and the Land Sword systems now in the military's arsenal, Taiwan says it's on track to continue modernizing its forces.
Officials here say that these tests are not only a great opportunity to test some of the older missiles that are approaching their expiration date, but it's also a chance to test new weapons and figure out any ways to improve them. Fu Haohong and Jaime Okan in Pingdong for TaiwanPlus.
A group of policy leaders and health experts from Taiwan are heading to Geneva, where the annual World Health Assembly is about to begin. Although Taiwan is not invited, it's planning several forums on the sidelines to share the country's expertise.
全民健康覆盖最主要目的就是说，不管这一个人在什么样的时间、什么样的地点，他的健康呢都要得到全方位的必要的医疗照顾。
Organized by a nonprofit group dedicated to promoting health and social welfare, it includes former Vice President and epidemiologist Chen Jianren, who will present on Taiwan's national health insurance system. Taiwan has not been invited to the WHA for almost a decade due to pressure from Beijing. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te is urging democratic countries to build supply chains that exclude China. In an interview with Japanese media Nikkei, Lai called on democracies to band together on trade and reduce reliance on Chinese suppliers. He also urged Japan to pursue a bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan, citing China's unfair market practices and the threat it poses to Taiwan's democracy. Taiwan currently produces over half of the world's most advanced semiconductor chips, with some materials and equipment still sourced from Chinese companies. Former Taiwanese President Tsai has called for deeper cooperation between democratic countries during a speech at Vilnius University in Lithuania. Tsai stressed Taiwan and Lithuania's shared experience of authoritarian rule, saying that both countries should cherish freedom and democracy. She also mentioned the $10 million worth of investments Taiwan and Lithuania have made to help rebuild Ukraine, and highlighted the two nations' collaboration in science and technology. Tsai is next set to travel to Denmark to speak at a democracy forum. She'll then go on to the UK, where she'll meet with politicians and Taiwanese people living there. Taiwanese gymnast Tseng Wei-sheng is bringing home a gold medal from an international gymnastics competition. The 26-year-old took the top spot in the men's vault at the World Challenge Cup in Bulgaria. It's the second gold medal of his career, following his men's vault victory at the 2022 World Challenge Cup in Hungary. Tseng's coach says he's now setting his sights on this year's World Championships and the 2026 Asian Games. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more of our stories. Finally, we head to Buenos Aires, where thousands of bikers are riding together to raise awareness for prostate cancer. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next time.
This month on Game on Taiwan, smash into the action at the Taipei Badminton Open. Feel the heat of the local basketball finals as teams battle for glory.
背起滑下之后 step back 跳投出手进，后仰的三分球。哇，这个时间真的是看李书豪一个人表演啊。
Cheer on Taiwan's athletes as they shine on the global stage. Catch the World Masters Games, where legends are made. And follow every thrilling moment of the CPBL race on and off the field.
挥棒落空，三振出局 ，Triangle set.
From local courts to international arenas, stay tuned for all the excitement on Game on Taiwan.